Okay, so this will be a contributed talk about our previous and some recent unpublished results on excitation propagation of H-spin waves in magnetic dots. And this is mostly done by actual and former students mentioned here, collaboration with Konstantin Guslienko and other collaborators who contributed to the growth of the systems. Okay, so the main problem of magnetic devices actually is that they are not yet truly broadband. So in principle, it's better they go to the about 10 gigahertz. Also redirection of spin waves, which was mentioned in some previous speakers, and the excitation is typically not so local. So one needs to contain the elements where excitation, local excitation would provide a really long range propagation of spin waves. And as was mentioned previously by Sebastian, already the way to propagate to channel spin waves and probably locally excite them was proposed by Winter already 50 years ago, and these are Winter magnons localized inside domain walls excitations. And he considered two types of excitation, ones which are localized and others which are spread out of the domain walls. And actually the first experimental observation of these Winter magnons was done by Russian scientists in '98 when they investigated the velocity of propagation of the domain walls in a functional field, and they observed the steps and they attributed these steps to the excitation of localized inside domain walls modes, which are Winter magnons. These were standing waves, basically. And also a couple of years ago, it was experimentally demonstrated after our first experimental work 10 years ago, that in fact in natural domain walls, inside natural domain walls, such modes could be also excited. But if you apply the field, certain field in certain direction, you can confine domain walls to the edges, and I will be talking mostly about this kind of spin waves along the edges. So I will summarize our first observations of such Winter magnons confined to the domain walls localized between vortex core and edges. These are double vortexes configurations in the circle magnetic dots. Then a number of papers where we experimentally and in simulations observed the H-spin waves in permalloy dots, and now we are very recent results on very effective excitation and propagation of H-spin waves in triangular jig dots. These are simulations and we are working also on experimental studies. Okay, this is what I mentioned, that our first report on Winter magnons was actually just 10 years ago when we observed these Winter magnons in a double vortex state in spectral dots. And actually you can understand that Winter magnons is this is an example of H waves which propagate along the border in San Sebastian. And you see that they are quite highly localized, and some swimmers here use these H modes to swim also. And you can create these H modes. You need extra excess exchange energy at the edges. You can create this or either applying external magnetic field optimized to compress them, the domain wall toward the edges, or you can in principle also send the current and in paramagnetic material also to create this spin-orbit coupling also to create the excess of energy along the domain walls. Nobody investigated these kind of systems in terms of H spin waves, but we will be dealing on the left kind of system. And this could be done in triangles, as we will mostly demonstrate here and analyze, but also in rectangular dots. But here you need inclined magnetic field, because here you have a kind of topological anomaly. So to break this, you need inclined magnetic field. And this was our first experimental observation in the B state of magnetic triangles, the experiment and simulations of these modes. Actually, if you apply magnetic field in different direction, equal direction, so you don't observe these H modes. And this is a snapshot of our proposal to excite locally and propagate H spin waves along from one corner to another in magnetic triangles. And you see here in the video, actually, let's see. So you can propagate them effectively through the corner. And here on this slide, you see that you can control the transmission over this corner from the left to the right side, for example, by using by changing the damping locally. And actually, the mechanical problem of redirection of spin waves is here. Even for my students, this could be resolved analytically, this model, and my students also have this kind of problem in mathematical method 3. Also, we proposed using these triangles and propagating spin waves as spin wave nanometers. Actually, in this corner, number 2, you can control the amplitude of the electromagnetic wave emission just by changing the relative phase of the emitters in points 1 and 2. Also, with these spin waves, you can send them and split in 2. Actually, here you have the cut to avoid any propagation inside, and then they just come back and they form again join in the narrow strip. So this is effective split element for splitting of spin waves. As I mentioned, that you can also do this for rectangular dots, for example, but you need inclined field in this case, and the spin wave will be propagated also along rectangular dot, like here. Also, we proposed the mechanism to avoid the external magnetic field. In this case, in this paper, it was proposed that we can just couple this ferromagnet to antiferromagnet, and due to exchange bias, we can just avoid the external magnetic field. Well, in the same paper, we also, with collaboration with Konstantin Kuslienko, developed an analytical model and compared this model with simulated dispersion of these spin waves. This is analytical model and dispersion, and the explanation of channeling of these spin waves was that this channel takes place due to anisotropic dispersion in this case. Some further studies of other groups that were, I just mentioned one of them, for example, exploit also these H-spin waves. For example, group of from Argonne National Laboratory, Valentin Navasat and Axel Hoffman, they just coupled the H to the also to other ferromagnet here. Permaloy jig, and due to by introduction of this asymmetry from left-hand side H, they just can tune the different energies in the age modes. And using this, they proposed that in such a system, they can just excite a age mode on one age for certain frequencies and not avoiding excitation on the opposite age. Also, one of the problems of this potential problem is that age should be quite sharp to avoid any disorder, and Janos Dubovic from Poznan, they managed to create very sharp edges in jig films, so this problem is also solvable. Okay, and in the next part, in the second part, I will show some of our recent simulation results on optimization of the angle aperture in the jig films to optimize the propagation, and we also have some surprising results on kind of possibility of amplification of these H-spin waves. Actually, we have quite big number of cells. The results do not depend if we increase even twice. This is discreditation, quite small discreditation, also to resolve here the domain wall, which appears in upper part, and to analyze how the domain wall optimization changes this angle. Here you see that exchange energy at zero field and external magnetic field. And you see that this is a domain wall, which we'll use to propagate spin waves, and we optimize the external magnetic field to have more optimum optimization. Here, for example, we have external magnetic field of 1 kilostate, so to still to have quite high exchange energy in this channel, and still to have quite small channel widths. This is how exchange energy depends on the width. So the width of this channel is about 70 nanometer. Also dimension of this dot was the base is 2 micron, and the localized energy here is relatively small. This is a typical spectrum of this, if you pulse just homogeneous pulse system. You have the main mode, and this group of frequencies is H modes. But what we will do in the following is that we will excite a system on the main mode and at the H, and this will allow more effective propagation of H mode. And in addition, we will see that there will be some kind of resonance magnification of the transmission at certain angles. Is the main result of this part is that this is transmission of the H mode analyzed just by looking on the amplitude of the mode on the left side, normalized to the amplitude of the mode on the right side, which is transmitted through the corner, and you see it's mostly 0.5 and below. But for certain angles, there is a resonant transmission, and even you will see at this point, you will see the transmission is higher than 1. This is quite surprising. So this is, for example, for 50 degrees. And you see that for 75, it's mostly localized on the left side, and the mode is quite suppressed on the right side. So we decided to see what happens here in this certain angle. And what happens here is that this is an analysis of the domain wall asymmetry. The snapshots are taken just after the excitation is stopped, or the continuous excitation is stopped. And you see that the domain wall is mostly asymmetric at these certain angles when the transmission is maximum. And this means this is interpreted that basically we have the maximum phase shift here from the left to the right side, And maximum phase shift is expected when the domain wall in this part, this is the magnetization of the corner, is resonantly excited. And actually we see that at this range of angles where we have resonant transmission, the phase shift from the left and the right side is like p by 2. This corresponds to resonant excitation. And basically what happens in this 50-degree angle is that there is accidental coincidence between the most intensive mode for the wall system, which is in red, and the highest frequency mode from the domain wall. So basically we analyzed separately modes, local modes from the domain wall in this region, local modes, and compared with the excited frequencies of the wall system. Here we have coincidence. Basically what happens is that part of the energy which we excite is pumped not only to the edge, but also pumped inside. And for this specific angle, the wall system also pumps energy to the domain wall, and it helps for resonant transmission of the edge mode through the edge, and actually it gives rise to this apparent magnification that the amplitude of the mode on the right side is bigger than amplitude of the mode on the left side. Well, with this I just comment on another possibilities through the excite intermagnons in vortex state, which we did in collaboration with Peter Ogrin group from Exeter. And these experiments, linear broadband experiments on the square dose, for example, you see that you can channel the spin waves along these domain walls, something similar what Sebastian Wins also was talking in the previous talk. And in principle, you can also excite in triangular dots in zero field. You can also propagate the spin waves with local excitation from one of the corner along the domain walls, and there is a bunch of off modes also in this case. At the moment are simulations. Well, with this I conclude that we discussed here propagation of quasi-one-dimensional spin modes along the edge in edges in mostly in ferromagnetic triangles. This could serve as a basic element for broadband information transmission and processing with easy redirection, splitting, and local control, which is important. Actually, here you can locally control and possibility to create spin wave NAND devices. And basically, this could be one of the future elements for a spin wave-based magnetic device based on the control of amplitude and phase. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Farkhad, for your presentation.
Yeah. The students, actual and recent students, Ahmad started also with me on this work a long time ago, and Dennis Dilema. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Farkhad, once again. So the talk is open for questions and discussions. So yes, so we have question from Ahmad Awad. Yeah, please proceed. Ahmad?
Sorry, it's not a question, just
comment.
Clapping. But yeah, but I would ask a question for the point where you have the crossing between the edge mode and it's like the bulk mode.
Yes, here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this would this be a good point or a bad point for a device like?
Actually, we understand that this is a good point, but this is a coincidence between the most intensive mode on the wall system and not the main, but the highest frequency mode of the domain wall. So it's just not excitation, it's kind of parametric excitation, if you want, of domain walls, because the coincidence is that not with the main mode. I did not show here spectrum, local spectrum of the domain wall here, it's at lower frequency than the spectrum of the bulk modes, but it coincides with the. So this is not direct excitation, but we understand at the moment this is one of the options to understand why there is such even a increase of the transmission above 1. This is a way to understand that in these specific angles, we excite domain walls and promote. We pump energy from the wall system. So basically, when we excite here, there is energy which is pumped to the edge, but there is energy which is pumped also to the bulk. And what happens is that these particular angles, the bulk modes excite some of the highest frequency mode of the domain wall, and this stimulates propagation, even pumps energy in this corner, and it increases the amplitude of the mode on the right side. This is more or less the hypothesis.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's slightly lower, basically you can excite like with a spin hole, the whole mesa, that would excite mostly the bulk mode, and then it will channel down to the lower mode. Maybe I don't know if this was tried in the simulation. Yeah.
Talk about this.
Okay.
So let's take a look whether we have questions. So seems to be not the case. Oh, I would have a short one. Farkhad, could you comment on that? For instance, as far as I understand, you tune this channeling along the edges by adjusting the magnetization to have it larger along the edge, right?
Yes.
Could you comment?
No, not larger. No, magnetization is not larger. Magnetization turned. Basically, here magnetization is along the edge, but here magnetization is along this edge. So we have external magnetic field. So here the magnetization turns from horizontal to the, let's say, 60 degrees. So this is 60-degree domain wall.
Okay.
This not magnetization is not increased here.
Okay, so it's about direction, but not value.
Yeah, yes, about direction. Yes.
Okay.